Well, Callum, it was a game which sort of summed up both clubs, really.
I suppose it's kind of, you look at the result first of all and it doesn't really suit either team particularly well. I mean, Inverurie, from being in front and then seeing Buckie reduced to 10 men, you'd probably want to go on and win from that position, and I mean they did have a couple of great chances to do that fell for Aidan Wilson, which they couldn't take, and then Buckie going for the league as they are pre-match, if he'd offered them a point, I don't think they would have taken it. But the way the game's panned out over the 90 minutes, it's probably not the worst result. I mean, said it often enough, but they keep going and they've managed to dig something out there when sort of things went against them. But I'm sure there is a bit of frustration as well that they haven't won. And I mean, you look at it's like this, both with them and Brechin, this title race, there's been a lot of twists and turns, and I'm sure there'll be more, but it's like Buckie's last 5 league games, they've won 2, they've lost 2, and they've drawn 1, which just sort of isn't quite the consistency they would want at this stage of the season. But obviously it's a tough league, and I think the sort of toll of playing Saturday, Wednesday maybe is having an impact as well.
Graham Stewart's asked his players to make sure it was a vital point earned rather than 2 dropped by going on and winning the last 10 games of the season to secure the championship. It's going to be a big ask.
It is a big ask. I mean, the thing that's interesting about it as well is if those last 10 games, if they win them, they will be champions, because they're 10 points behind Brechin with the 3 games in hand, and the sides play each other at Victoria Park next a week on Wednesday. So we'll come on to Brechin later obviously, but it's there for both teams now really. If you go and win your games, you know you'll win the league, which is obviously a good position to be in, but you've got to go and do it as well. I mean, Buckie playing, and I mean this Wednesday coming, playing for Martin United, another really tricky game, so it's going to be a great end to the season, a lot to play for clearly.
Locos, for their part, are certainly finishing the season strongly, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, they've put together, I think they're eight unbeaten now in all competitions, league and Aberdeenshire Cup, and they've put together a good run. And I've said in previous weeks, but you can sort of see what Dean Donaldson wants to do and how they're sort of looking to build things up. And I mean, even with an eye on next season, like they've signed Aidan Wilson already. There's obviously the unknown a wee bit with Miles Gaffney and Milos Ochmanski being on loan for Cove, whether they keep them or what happens. But we've probably been saying for quite a few months now with Locos, it's sort of anything they can do this season's probably a bonus in a way, because of the start they had for a long time. It's sort of been maybe about building towards next season, but obviously they've got a cup final, Aberdeenshire Cup final as well, which if Saturday's game between the sides is anything to go to, that'll be another good watch. So they've done that and they've improved in the league, and it's all pretty positive. And I mean, the only, Dean was saying afterwards, he couldn't be too critical of his players. The only slight thing probably for them is that wee bit of frustration that they didn't see the game out and win on Saturday.
A fine win for Martin United then, and the star of the show, Aaron Reid, with his hat-trick.
Aye, I mean, he was hugely influential and all that for Martin. Did well, certainly in an attacking sense on Saturday, and just, you know, any team going to Dudgeon Park, you take any sort of win, but to go up and win in that manner, hugely impressive for Martin. I mean, they said before, but they carry plenty of threats. I mean, Aaron Reid, since he come in on loan in January, scored 9 goals, I think it is now, which is a handy return. They've got Julian Wade, they've got Paul Campbell, even players like Scott Lyle, Aidan Coombe coming off the bench. So they carry a lot of threat, and they made good use of it on Saturday. And I mean, some of Aaron's finishes that we saw, really good striking play, and he's a player, even though he's only I think 19, he's a player now who's, you know, proven himself at Highland League level. For me, no question about it now, in terms of the sort of year he had at Turriff, what he did there, and then coming up for Martin, he's shown he's certainly capable at this level. The question probably for him going forward is, can he go higher? I mean, he's obviously at Aberdeen just now. Whether he's ends up back at like a Peterhead, Cove, Elgin next season, you sort of wait to see potentially, but he's certainly a player with a big future.
As pleasing an afternoon as it was for the visitors, not quite so much for Brora. A disappointing one for Ali McDonald.
Aye, I mean, the thing is with Brora, they'd sort of regained a bit of momentum. They'd won 3 in a row prior to that. They have got this issue again, but like Bucky, with a huge amount of midweek games to play, and I know Ali's been trying to sort of rotate his squad and try and, you know, not put the burden all on the same players. And they've had like Ali Morrison's obviously signed on loan for Ross County a few weeks ago, and Josh Meekins has come back and things like that. But it's tough for Brora, and I think, like, not even just this season, but over a couple of seasons now, although neither side's probably in a position to win the not in a position to win the league now, Saturday's game, those sort of games against the sides around them that you'd be competing with to potentially win a league, Brora have struggled in them for a couple of seasons now. Their record's not the best, and that's something that I think they're going forward they're keen to address, and even again going into next season you'd be trying to address. And even with what's still to play for this season, they've also got a Highland League Cup final coming up against Fraserburgh, and clearly, although I thought they created quite a few chances actually in Saturday's game, clearly if you want to be winning the likes of that final, they'll need to improve a few things from that. Looking
at the other games, Clachnacuddin 0, Brechin City 2, both goals coming in the second half from Grady McGrath and Murray McIntosh. An important win for Gavin Price's side.
Yeah, a good win in the end. I mean, obviously they drew with Forest Mechanics in midweek, and then again going back to the league, it sort of felt like that had sort of put the ball a bit more in Bucky's court again, but then Bucky have drawn at the weekend, Brechin have won, back to the 10 points in front. I mean, they found a way, which is the main thing. Grady McGrath back starting, made the breakthrough, and then Murray McIntosh has added the second. And Clach had probably, okay, Brechin hit the woodwork a couple of times in the first half, but Clach had probably done quite well to frustrate them actually and keep it at 0-0 as long as they did. And they actually had a couple of decent chances early on themselves, but then I'm sure Connor Gethin's both goals from a Clach point of view defensively, they could probably deal with them better, but that's maybe the difference a wee bit when you play the top sides, is little mistakes you'll get punished for them, whereas maybe in some games you get away with them. But I think Clach can take sort of positives from the performance, even though they didn't get any points. For Brechin, it's Gavin Price said sort of win was all important, they got it, move on to the next one. Even off, I mean, the game's almost sort of become in terms of the Clach end of things anyway, overshadowed a wee bit by the news on Sunday that Chairman Alex Chisholm and directors Scott Dowling and Chris Forbes are stepping down, leaving the club. At this stage, sitting here right now, I don't know the full ins and outs, but certainly it'd be interesting to see what happens going forward at Grant Street Park, because those are 3 guys who over various years have put in a huge amount of time to Clachnacuddin and kept the club running and have sort of long connections to that club. So it'd be interesting to see who maybe comes in there and what the sort of future direction of the club is. But I mean, certainly for Alex and Scott and Chris, I can personally, I'm sort of sad to see them go as well, because I know the sort of work that they've put in at Grant Street.
Elsewhere, Bankside 4, Forest Mechanics 0. D remain heading up the chasing pack as it stands. Ethan Cairns putting D ahead against his former loan club with an early header. I think Max Alexander doubled the lead, and then Michael Phillipson and Gary Wood wrapped it up with 2 goals in the final 6 minutes. A good day's work for D.
Aye, they'd been looking for a response. Obviously, I mean, they defeats to Fraserburgh and Buckie have sort of punctured their hopes of winning the title. I mean, you look at the position they're in now. If they win their remaining games, they get to 77 points, which personally, although that would be, I mean, if they could do that, it'd be a very good season for them still, and worth remembering they won the Aberdeenshire Shield back in December also. But to sit, like, you feel like Buckie or Brechin, whoever, will get past 77 points into the 80s, and that's why you sort of feel they're the two contenders now. But Banks of Dee, you know, they've done what they had to do on Saturday. Paul Lawson was pleased with the performance and the manner of the victory, and more goals you score, the better it is. I mean, I thought for Forrest as well, it's like frustrating, maybe in Stephen McDonald's touched on it a wee bit, maybe inconsistency from game to game sometimes, or even half to half, because I mean, he felt like they were in the game for quite a while on Saturday, but then he ended up saying that the outcome didn't really flatter Banks of Dee in the end. But you see, like with Forrest, I mean, drawing with Brechin on Wednesday, they are capable, and even the weekend previously played well in defeat to Brora. So it's just like there is the makings of a good team, and we've seen it at times in the result, in bare results, that they're a decent outfit for us. But sometimes you maybe get days like Saturday, which is a bit frustrating for folk.
Elsewhere, Nairn County 0, Fraserburgh 3 different scorers for the Brocket Station Park. All the goals coming in the second half there. Ryan Sargent, Scott Barber and Sean Butcher wrapping up the points for Mark Cowie's side. The Brock will go second if they can win at Forest in midweek, which would put them 3 behind Brechin. I know you've just said that 78, 77 is probably not enough, but they couldn't, could they?
Again, it's like Fraserburgh win their game. 78 points is a good return, but I'd still feel that a Buckie or a Brechin probably gets more points than that. I mean, it's like I think Fraserburgh probably, there's 2 or 3 results they'll look back on and think that's just a few teams probably the same, but it's like just a couple of results here and there this season. I think the draw at home to Clach when they conceded with the last kick of the ball and things like that. It's a couple of results that have just sort of hampered them being right up there, but certainly they're in quite a decent run overall, and you know, they could, I think, certainly at race at least to be in the top 4. They're right in the mix for that, maybe finishing second, third, whatever. Good win as well, going back to Saturday's game. Station Park, never an easy place to go, and these sort of usual suspects a wee bit, Sargent, Barber and Butcher, doing what Fraserburgh needed them to do. Nairn maybe a wee bit unlucky. They did. Jamie Carnahan very nearly put them in front and hit the inside of the post, and they go in the first half at 0-0, and maybe it's a different game if that happens. Also, if you looked at the sheets on Saturday, Nairn quite actually shorter bodies, had a few sort of youngsters on the bench and things. Stephen Mackay was back in playing, and maybe one of them games just catching up, and injuries and 1 or 2 things that can make it tricky. But they've still got 4 games left, and they could still get to, if they win them, still get to 60 points, which would be a very good return.
Huntly are certainly in the groove at the minute. They beat Wick Academy 2-1 at Christie Park. It's a 4th successive home win for the Black and Golds, and Andy Hunter's double making it 23 for the season. Colin Charlesworth talking up his striker. He's a cracking player and a talent. His goal numbers this season are scary, says the manager. How important is he to the Black and Golds? And dare I say, given he's out of contract in the summer, how big a fight they're going to have keeping him there?
Well, the first thing, to your first part of your question, he's very important. He's just a difference maker in terms of, well, clearly goals when he scored 23 this season, but he's guile and nous in the final third, and his link-up play as well. He's sort of, I've always felt he can knits everything together for Huntly in that final third, and they're clearly a better side when he's in the final third. In terms of keeping him, I mean, I'd imagine there would clearly be interest, the form he's been in, but it's one of them where, speaking to people at Huntly, the situation's certainly, I think, far from resolved at the minute. Like, even last season, I mean, Andy sort of took his time and then decided he would stay again, so I think it's one where they'll be having discussions about it, but clearly, obviously, Huntly will be desperate for him to remain when you see how well he's done this season, and looking at things in the way they are just now, the Black and Golds are the team that's sort of in the pole position to finish sort of 7th. I mean, you'd expect, in whatever order, Brechin, Buckie, Banks, Adi, Fraserburgh, Fermartin, Brora to be the top 6, but Huntly are the side best placed at the minute to potentially finish 7th, and again, if they could do that, it'd be a good season for them. For Wick, I mean, Gary Manson sort of maybe disappointed at times, when maybe a bit too passive he felt, in the first goal they conceded, maybe a bit scrappy, and it's like one of those days where things go against you, but I wouldn't think it'll derail them too much, because they've had a few decent results of late as well.
Right, to Banff then. Deveronvale 0, Strathspey Thistle 3. A second win of the season for Strathspey as they complete the double over the Vale. Sean McIntosh saved Owen Loveland's penalty, but the visitors would not be denied in this one. Michael McKenzie breaking the deadlock before Loveland makes amends by adding a second. Ross Logan then wrapping up the points 2 minutes from time. A superb win for the Granton Jags, really. Really
good win for them, and I mean, clean sheet as well. I think that's has been an issue for them, not just this season, but probably longer term, in terms of keeping the ball out of the net, and they've managed to do that, which I'd imagine will please Michael Ray, the interim manager, no end. And the fact it came back from the sort of maybe frustration of not scoring for the penalty spot's a good sign for them as well, because I imagine there's a few folk involved with Strathspey, when the penalty was saved, had probably thought, oh, here we go, have we missed our chance? But they haven't, and a really good win for them. I mean, obviously, in terms of trying to get off the bottom, still looks unlikely. I mean, they're 10 points behind Clach, who they play at Seafield Park this weekend. So, I mean, I still feel that with the games they've got to play and things, time's probably running out for Strathspey a wee bit in terms of not finishing bottom. But if they could follow it up and win on Saturday again against Clach, would make things a bit more interesting towards the bottom end of the table. Another thing to point out as well with Saturdays, they only had a squad of 12 players really, so even more impressive to go to Princess Royal Park and win. Going for the Deveronvale side of things, Craig Stewart's unfortunately resigned following that defeat, and I think certainly, well, he did his sort of post-match press before he announced or decided to resign, but I think in his quotes he was at a bit of a loss. Like, you look at their recent results, they had a really good win against Turriff United a couple of Wednesdays ago, played really well. They did a draw with Rothes when they came back for 2-0 down, could have won. Even last week against Brechin, they were in front and did well in spells, and then what he's seen in terms of their performance on Saturday is clearly not at all what he's looking for, and obviously didn't feel it was good enough. And I think if you look at Craig's time overall at Deveronvale, he's had a tricky job. Like, he's been manager three years fully, and he's been involved as a coach and that before, another 5 and a bit years prior to that. And the time he's been there, it's been quite a tricky job in terms of he's lost Ross Aitken, sold to Fraserburgh, Matthew Wallace sold to Banks Adine at Huntly, Horace Ormsby sold to Nairn, and that, that's 3 players that are doing well at clubs higher up the table, so that's big players for the Vale to lose. You add in again this season, Dane Ballard hasn't been available because of his injury in pre-season, and there hasn't really been the scope to go out and replace him as such as you might have wanted to do. So there's been a lot of factors maybe gone against Craig a wee bit, and I think it's a tricky job at Deveronvale because there is quite a few good young players there and potential, and if you could keep them together and things, I think there's a bright future. But maybe keeping them together is a thing, or people having the patience for you to do that's the thing I don't know. And even you look at some of Craig's signings, like brought in players like Innes Mackay, who's now sort of, I mean, he's still quite a young player, now sort of recognised as one of the sort of good top centre halves in the league, and been a lot of interest in him previously, and Craig sort of picked him up out of the juniors maybe when people weren't so much looking at him. And he's brought in kind of young players like Ryan Park, Jaden Bradford, Jay Goldie, and sort of blooded them, and they've shown themselves to be good players for Deveronvale, and they've got good futures. So I think it's like, clearly I think Craig probably feels over his time overall results haven't been good enough, but I do think there's been some bright spots as well, and I don't think for whoever comes next, I don't really think it's a particularly easy job. I don't think there's like a quick fix necessarily, and I mean, even looking further ahead, the club's trying to replace their floodlights and things like that, so I wouldn't imagine in terms of the
football budget,
side of things, there'll be a huge amount of money for whoever comes next to work with either.
You got any names to throw in the frame for us? Or?
I mean, hard being on holiday as well, and maybe Nays in touch with it as usual, but I mean, you look at like, there's folk like, I mean, Chris Hunter's one who's been out of the game in terms of management for a couple of years now, but been proven previously with like Fraserburgh Turf for Martin. Would he be interested? Maybe good experience. Andy Lowe's somebody, I mean, had these 2 spells at Locos and it hasn't really worked out, but this is maybe a different challenge. Is it more suitable? I mean, this kind of, I mean, Ross, whether it would work geographically with him being based in Inverness, I don't know, but kind of like Ross Jacks, somebody that's obviously another one good experience in the league. Or do you maybe some of the sort of managers towards the top end of the North Region juniors, like so Lee Youngson at Cooter or a Steve Watson at Hermes, or these sort of guys who've maybe done well in the juniors and want to try and test themselves moving up. But be it, like, I imagine there'll be plenty of folk interested, but what direction Deveronvale go in next, I'm not quite sure.
2 games left to round up then. Rothes 1, Turriff United 3. Turriff coming from behind to win at McKissick Park. Jake Thompson's penalty had put the home side ahead in the 4th minute before Liam Strachan equalised just before the break. John Allen and Murray Cormack then getting the goals in the second half to secure victory for Warren Cummins' side. They're still ticking away quite nicely.
Well, it's probably a win they were needing a wee bit, because it had five without a win prior to that. They'd sort of dropped off a touch, so to win at McKissick Park, I think could be quite hard. Clearly, be quite happy with. I think they were well on top by all accounts as well. They hit the woodwork 3 times, I believe, as well during that game. So worthy winners, I would say. I mean, for Rothes, it's like they probably just want almost the end of the season coming away, because I mean, you look at the players missing. List in front of me: Michael Finnis, Greg Morrison, Alan Pollock, Fraser Robertson, Alan McKenzie, Ben Johnson, Ben Williamson, Kyle White, Duncan Proudfoot. A lot of good players that any team would miss, and I mean, some young players have come in and done well, and probably long-term good experience for them, but clearly in the short term of getting results, it's challenging. And I think, like a few clubs now, that Rothes are mid-table, it's about trying to build things for next season, and Richard Hastings maybe got an eye in the sort of transfer market as well, and who he can maybe bring in and things like that. So this is one of them where I think when the end of the season comes, they'll sort of be, that's maybe when they can really get down to business.
Our last game then, Keith 1, Lossiemouth 0. the Maroons are flying at the minute. 7 games unbeaten, thanks to Gavin Elphinston's free kick for his 7th goal of the season. Craig Ewan must be a very happy man with what he's getting.
You'd think he would be, yeah. Because, I mean, first of all, that goal on Saturday, goal fit, the old cliche, but goal fit to win any game. A really, really good free kick for Gavin Elphinston. And Keith, I mean, 7 games unbeaten in the league, 15 points out of 21. For any team, that's a good run of form, but for a team in the bottom half of the table, especially, it's top class, really. And they're up to 12th now in the table, 26 points, just 1 point behind last season's total, with 8 games to play. And it's like if Keith could say finish 12th and put quite a few more points on the board, I think that would be a good season. I mean, they've had maybe challenges at times this season, but I think they've built quite a good squad now, the majority of whom are, I think, secured for next season as well. I think they're going forward, could be quite a bright future at Keith in terms of trying. I mean, it's very competitive, as we always touch on here, but in terms of trying to build again and keep climbing, I think you'd be quite optimistic if you're a Keith supporter, certainly on the basis of the recent run of form. For Lossy, I thought Frank McGettrick's comments afterwards were quite interesting in terms of he felt his side lacked belief and they got what they deserved, and it's quite strange a week after beating Buckie, you'd think maybe belief would be coursing through the veins of the Coasters players, but that's, again, it's like sides in the bottom half. Lossy, it's just that consistency sometimes in terms of what they're doing with levels of performance, because we've seen numerous occasions this season when everything goes for them and they play well, they can beat anyone and they're a good side. But then again, it's like the likes of a game like Saturday's one where you're looking through the fixtures and it's against a side around them they'd feel like they've got a good chance of doing something, and then to sort of not hit the standards they would like to is clearly a disappointment for Frank.
Well, after a busy weekend in the Breeded Highland League, let's see how those results impact the Highland League table.